Manufacturing is starting to move back to the United States. After decades of factories leaving for cheaper labor overseas, something is changing. Companies are reopening plants, building new ones, and bringing production closer to home. And a lot of that activity is happening in one place, the Midwest. But that doesn't make sense. The system that pushed manufacturing out of the Midwest for the last 30 years still exists. Labor is still cheaper abroad. Global supply chains are still in place. So why is manufacturing coming back? And why here? The answer starts in a place most people would never think to look. This is Ashland, Ohio. Population about 20,000. No skyline, no major airport, no reason at first glance for this place to matter. But in manufacturing, the places that matter usually don't look important. They're positioned. Put Ashland on a map, and something strange starts to happen. It sits almost exactly between Cleveland and Columbus. Interstate 71 runs alongside it. But that's not the real advantage. Draw a 300-mile circle around this town. Inside it, Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Toronto, Indianapolis, Cincinnati. Expand it to 500 miles, and now you're reaching New York, Philadelphia, Nashville, Atlanta. Within a single day's drive, a third of North America's population, and a massive share of its industrial demand. That's not a small town advantage, that's a structural one. And here's where this gets interesting. Ashland isn't inside any of those expensive metros. Land is cheaper, warehousing is cheaper, labor is competitive. Same access, lower cost. Which raises a much bigger question. If places like this are so well positioned, why did they collapse in the first place? To understand what's happening now, you have to understand what the Midwest actually was. It wasn't luck, it wasn't policy, it was geography. Iron ore came out of Minnesota's Iron Range. Coal came out of Appalachia. And where those two met, along the Great Lakes, something powerful formed: steel. And once you had steel, everything followed: Cleveland, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Chicago. Cars, machines, infrastructure. And around them, hundreds of smaller cities like Ashland, producing parts, components, and specialized goods. By the early 20th century, this wasn't just a region. It was a system, one built on proximity. Raw materials nearby, factories clustered together, products shipped short distances to customers. By 1915, Ashland had 47 factories. One company, F.E. Myers, employed 800 people in a town of just 8,000 at the time. That only happens when production clusters tightly together, when everything, materials, labor, suppliers, has to stay close to function. It worked because distance mattered. And then, distance stopped mattering. Starting in the late 20th century, the rules changed. Container shipping made it cheap to move goods across oceans. Global supply chains made it easy to separate production from consumption. And labor costs became the dominant variable. If you could make something cheaper somewhere else, you did. Not because the Midwest stopped making sense, but because distance temporarily stopped costing so much. And once that happened, the entire system unraveled. Factories didn't disappear all at once. They moved, first slowly, then all at once. After China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, the shift accelerated. Between 2000 and 2010, Ohio alone lost more than 400,000 manufacturing jobs. Not over a century, in a decade. For decades, global manufacturing ran on a simple assumption: distance didn't really matter. If you could make something cheaper on the other side of the world, you did, because shipping was fast, reliable, predictable. That system worked for nearly 30 years, and then it didn't. It didn't break all at once. It broke piece by piece. One factory shut down in China, one port backlog in California, one cargo ship stuck in the Suez Canal, and suddenly, production lines thousands of miles away stopped. Not because demand disappeared, but because distance became a problem again. And once distance becomes a problem, the entire system starts to strain. Even if production is still cheaper overseas, Delays, disruptions, and missing components can erase that advantage instantly. A single breakdown anywhere in the chain, and everything downstream stops. And that wasn't the only shift. The geopolitical environment changed too. US-China tensions turned efficiency into risk. Dependence on a single country stopped looking like optimization and started looking like exposure. Even if the system still works most of the time, companies can't afford the moment when it doesn't. And then the economics changed. Shipping costs, which had stayed low for decades, surged. And automation started removing the original reason to offshore in the first place. If a robot does the job, cheap labor matters less, which means location starts to matter more. Even if labor is cheaper abroad, that advantage shrinks once you factor in time, risk, and coordination. And once you put all of that together, the equation flips. Distance isn't free anymore. It has a cost. And when distance has a cost again, geography comes back into the decision. You can see it happening in real time. Since 2010, more than 2 million manufacturing jobs have been announced as reshored or brought back through foreign investment. And the projects coming back aren't the same ones that left. These aren't low-cost factories. They're high-tech, capital-intensive operations. This isn't companies going backward, it's companies recalculating. The Sun Belt has gotten most of the attention. Tennessee, Texas, South Carolina. Lower taxes, faster growth. New factories going up everywhere. And for a lot of industries, that works. But manufacturing, especially the kind that's coming back, has a different constraint. It's not just about cost, it's about distance. A factory in Texas might be cheaper to build, but it's farther from the largest concentration of customers in North America. A factory in South Carolina can access ports, but most of the demand isn't overseas, it's inland. Even if those locations are cheaper, every extra mile adds time, coordination, and risk. And once distance has a cost again, those trade-offs start to matter. This is where the Midwest looks different, not because it changed, but because the system around it did. The interstate system was built around this region. I-70, I-71, I-75, I-80, I-90, one of the densest freight networks in the world, all converging in the same place. From central Ohio, you can reach Chicago and Detroit in a single day's drive, New York City and Atlanta in 2. For just-in-time manufacturing, that's not just a convenience, that's the system working. Even if production costs are slightly higher, being closer to suppliers and customers reduces everything else: delays, inventory, coordination. And then there's something harder to replicate: the workforce. Generations of machinists, welders, tool and die makers, process engineers. When factories closed, that knowledge didn't disappear, it stayed. Even if you build a new factory somewhere else, you can't instantly build that system of experience. And once you combine all of it, proximity, infrastructure, workforce, cost, you get something rare. A region that still matches how modern manufacturing actually works. Not everywhere, but in places like this. Even if companies try to rebuild these systems somewhere else, they run into the same constraints all over again: distance, coordination, time. The same problems, just in a different place. Which brings us back to Ashland. What makes this place interesting isn't that it's booming, it's that it never fully broke. While other cities became dependent on a single industry, steel in Youngstown, autos in Flint, Ashland spread its manufacturing across dozens of smaller producers. No single collapse, no defining headline, just continuity. And that matters more than it looks, because the system never disappeared. It fragmented, it adapted, but it stayed in place. Today, Ashland County still has more than 80 manufacturers. Different products, different industries, but the same foundation. Industrial components, adhesives, water systems, building materials. Not flashy, but deeply embedded in supply chains that still exist. And now, the system around it is changing again. 50 miles to the south, one of the largest manufacturing investments in modern American history is taking shape. A $20 billion semiconductor complex near Columbus. That kind of facility doesn't operate in isolation. It pulls in suppliers, precision parts, materials, logistics, support industries. And those suppliers don't need to be in the same city, they need to be close, within hours, not days. Even if production could happen somewhere cheaper, proximity reduces everything else: time, risk, coordination. And that's where places like Ashland fit, right between Cleveland and Columbus, inside the same infrastructure network. Close enough to supply, cheap enough to operate. The same geographic logic that made this place valuable a century ago never disappeared. It just stopped mattering, until now. For decades, the global economy ran on a simple assumption. If you could make something cheaper far away, you did, because distance didn't really cost anything. Shipping was cheap, supply chains were stable, risk was easy to ignore. So manufacturing moved, not because the Midwest stopped making sense, but because distance temporarily stopped mattering. And now, that assumption is breaking. When companies have to factor in supply chain risk, geopolitical exposure, and the cost of being far from their customers, distance comes back into the equation. And when distance matters again, geography matters again. Which means the places built around proximity, infrastructure, and industrial systems start to look different. Not new, just newly relevant. The Midwest wasn't built by accident. It was built for a system where location matters. And that system is coming back.